Okay, in this section, I want to talk about careers and hobbies as part of our identity. And I want to make a quick caveat that if we envision careers as part of our identity, I think that's true for a high percentage of us. I don't want to say that those are necessarily a choice. So, using myself as an example, in my 20s, I was a delivery driver. That's what I did. And so that was, how did that impact my identity? Well, it impacted it by my socioeconomic status. It impacted it by um, my perception and perhaps public perception of a person with that profession. I had a big chip on my shoulder when I was a delivery driver because people tend to interact with folks in those capacities as though they must not be very bright. And I struggle with that. Moreover, I struggled with the belief that I was trapped in that occupation and in that socioeconomic status, and that was very damaging to my identity. I did not perceive myself as having other choices. I didn't have other marketable job skills or a a degree or any type of educational background. So I reached essentially the greatest amount of money that I could make, given the skill set that I had, and I couldn't envision moving past that. Because we were working class poor, we lived in a poor neighborhood, and we lived well below the middle class standard. So the ways in which that affected my identity were huge. I saw myself as quote unquote trailer trash. I saw myself as, or I was rather, working class poor. And so living in as a working class poor kind of lifestyle and living in a poor neighborhood are very oftentimes very damaging to a person's sense of identity, which is sad, right? This is not about my worth. This is not about the value of what I did. What I did was important, but I didn't see it as such. I didn't value it as such. And then it's interesting to me to notice that I've worked in a number of different fields and a lot of different occupations, and some of those had a huge impact on my identity, and many did not. So when I was turned 30, I was given the opportunity to go to college, and I did, and I'm very glad that I did, but I did not conceptualize being a college student as part of my identity. Perhaps because I was a non traditional student, perhaps because I knew that this was a transitional part of my life. As I went very quickly through college and took accelerated programs, I ended up working in frontline positions in social service jobs early on. I later became a community crisis worker, and in none of those roles did they really become part of my identity. I saw them again as transitional on my way to becoming who I most wanted to be professionally and the work that I most wanted to do. So, my ultimate goal was to become a therapist. I achieved that. And what I've learned about a very high percentage of jobs in the healing and helping professions is that they very much become part of our identity. They're part of it. They become a lifestyle in and of themselves. And I think that's easy to see in some professions and hard to see in others. So, military, law enforcement, and maybe to a lesser extent, medical professions, folks in those fields tend to socialize and spend time outside of work with people who do the same type of work. And so, in a very real sense, it's a subculture unto itself. It is an important part of a person's identity and how they understand themselves, how they make sense of their lives, and why they do the things that they do. In my case, I became a therapist, which had a lot of really unexpected benefits. So I never really thought it through, I guess. I knew that I was going to spend my career trying to attain a greater understanding of people in general. Um, I knew that, for example, I've spent a combined total of over 30 years just listening to people. And so Obviously, that's made me a better listener. Those types of experiences and the skills that I developed impacted all of the relationships that I have outside of my work. And so, what I find is, if you'll pardon me saying so, I find neurotypical, mainstream, quote unquote, normal people to be insufferably boring. And I don't socialize with them in any way, shape, or form. Um, that's kind of a bold statement. It might sound a little bit arrogant. It's simply the truth. And it is very much part of my identity. It is very much how the work that I do is an extension of the person that I am. And as I continue to practice in this field and as I continue to become more skilled in it, it's affected my worldview. It's affected the way in which I experience relating to people profoundly. So my career continued to evolve, and each time that I took on a new role or a new set of responsibilities, those didn't fit into my current identity. So it's very common for people who go into the kind of work that I do. They experience imposter syndrome when they're coming in. We feel like we're not prepared, we're not worthy, we're not smart enough, we're not something enough to be able to fulfill the roles that we're in. And for a counselor, that is almost guaranteed to happen. And we encourage folks to be patient with themselves and to give themselves time to be new and have a willingness to make mistakes and all of those things that are kind of common sense advice that we give to people in any profession. And then as you go, maybe you get promoted. Maybe you become a clinical supervisor or an executive director, or you take on other roles and responsibilities. And each time you do that, it will change your identity because for example, I went from being a person who professionally was only responsible to myself to being a person who supervised others. And so that brought up a small amount of imposter syndrome. Do I know enough? Am I capable? Am I going to do a good job? I went through that when I became a clinical director. I went through it again when I became an executive director. I went through it again when I became self-employed, when I became an employer. And as my clinic grew and I had more and more people working for me, it required ongoing adjustments to my understanding of self, to my awareness of self, and it has absolutely had a very positive impact on my identity, and it has opened me up more fully to how, for example, how do my clients experience me? How do my employees experience me? It brings about a greater sense of self, and I've been fortunate to have a lot of good people in my life that have taught me about me. I think that being receptive to the insights and the appreciation of good people is very conducive to building a healthier sense of identity. Um, for myself, even when I recognized that what I had learned growing up in my family of origin and through socialization, even when I knew that those things weren't true, it didn't necessarily tell me what was true. I think I was afraid to develop a healthy appreciation for myself and consequently a strong identity. I was afraid of becoming arrogant. I was afraid of becoming very much like people in my family of origin. And what I've since learned is that, again, identity is a choice. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of practice to embody these characteristics, but they're vital. So that's about your career, and I hope that you get to do something you love. I hope that you get to, if you find that you've made a huge investment only to be in a career that you don't enjoy, then I hope you'll have the courage and the opportunity to leave it. I don't think that's what most people do. I think if for most of us, if we went to college or we had extensive training to take on a particular role, most of us continue to do it even if we don't find it fulfilling, even if we hate it. So I've learned that being trapped is a state of mind. I've learned that change is almost always possible, but it requires integration. It requires a willingness to change habits, change mindset, change a great many things. And I've learned that I need a lot of support with that. I want to touch on hobbies real quick because those are not only are those important to our quality of life and to our socialization and enjoyment, for a lot of us, they are important outlets because we don't enjoy other parts of our lives. Maybe we don't like our jobs. And so they provide something that we don't experience in other parts of our lives. And sometimes we see those as an extension of identity. Sometimes they're vitally important to a person's sense of self. Um, a really serious motorcycle enthusiast is the example that comes to mind. So, for a lot of people in my life, being a biker is an important part of who they are. It's something that they absolutely love doing. They see it as a lifestyle, they see it as an extension of their personality. For other people, I've known a lot of runners, particularly people who do long races, marathons, ultras, that kind of stuff. Running is vitally important to them. It is very much an extension, a manifestation of who they are. And I think that's fantastic. I think if it brings something good into your life and it hurts no one, then that's awesome. I'm going to be rooting for you. Um, Plenty of other outlets. I've had a lot of people in my life who are very talented creatively and are artists of different types, or musicians, or writers of different types. I think being able to have outlets for things that we're passionate about is a vital part of becoming the people that we most want to be. And the beautiful thing about having those hobbies and interests is that it gives us things to look forward to, which is a huge part of making life more manageable and more enjoyable. It also is a safeguard against compassion fatigue and burnout. The more that we have shared experiences, the more that we have things in our life that we love and really enjoy doing, it literally is good for your physiological health. It is good for your mental health, and the benefits just can't be overstated. So, again, let's look at what's in your life currently. Where are you at in your career? Is it healthy? Is it satisfying? Is it time to consider a change? Do you have options there? Let's look at your hobbies and how you spend your spare time. It's one of my biggest pet peeves as a therapist is when people tell me they don't have time. And I'll immediately ask them, how many hours of TV do you watch a week? How much time do you spend with Netflix and screen times? How much time do you spend doing things that really don't provide fulfillment or satisfaction? And what could you be doing instead? It's not like I want to bash on TV. If that's what you love doing, cool, do that. But if you find that your life is not fulfilling and not satisfying, my favorite question to ask is, what would you rather be doing? And will you allow yourself to pursue that or some variation of that, incrementally bringing you more towards not just the things that you want to do, but incrementally it'll bring you closer to being the person that you most want to be.